Cheers.
Cheers, you guys.
So, yeah, and it was awful. It was a loss of a friendship, and what was really insulting was what had happened. Well, I had to pay for all of the cancellation fees. So we went after them for 10 grand for my troubles and the cancellation fees. And Alison at Air was very good. The Fix was very good. So listen, we'll negotiate something with quite a big band. And so the producer then emailed me saying, "Hey, bud, listen, if we're going to hand over this 10 grand, any chance we can use some of your music for the DVD extras?"
Oh my God, it's like...
Yeah, and he got one of my emails back, which I again regret really writing, because you should.
Who sent you the text? The director? And
the producer, who I again would supported over this 15 years.
And what was the excuse?
How could you do a vault fast like that? So.
Well, I think what had happened is because the turnaround was so quick on the score, is I think that they'd started to get this other guy near where they were living to do an electronica score. And I think they just got to a point where they went, "This is working better."
Yeah.
So they'd lost faith in me, but kind of kept me going, burning air miles, all of that.
Yeah.
But I think that is. I mean, the essay question for today I was going to ask is, if you could go back to the beginning of your career and tell yourself something, what would that be?
Okay. Do we have to start with that straight away?
We don't have to start with that straight away. But I think the main thing that I'm looking back at is there's never a period when you just go, "I have arrived.
Yeah.
I've achieved this."
No.
Can I tell you the best thing that anyone said to me?
What?
You never arrive because there's nowhere to park.
It's brilliant. I'm so going to use that.
I think a lot of it would be to relax and a little bit more, because I would find that waiting for directors' notes, and then panic that sometimes that would cause, or the sort of turmoil that I go through, as in thinking how to address them. Often I've found recently that actually that a note that's given is actually smaller than you think, and it's not necessarily the thing that you think it is. It might be, so somebody picks up and says, "Oh, I don't like it doing that," and you go into sort of lots of mental gymnastics about, what do they mean? Why are they saying that? And in fact, they're just saying they don't like the cue, or it doesn't do it for them. So I suppose I would say to myself to try and take the notes of the people that you're working for, that sometimes think around it a bit more and not be quite so literal sometimes, because it's all semantics. It's like somebody says, "Oh, it's making me feel sad." There are times, I've learned, for example, there are certain nuances in scores that I've done that. There's a certain kind of austere bleakness, shall we say, a kind of Shostakovich type kind of bleakness that I personally like, right? And I can never get it into any score, right? I got it into Tess of the D'Urbervilles, but there's a kind of hard won austerity that I really like in scores, and I don't hear it very much. And so and I remember a director, often I've tried to smuggle that kind of harmony into things and had it rejected, and it's just that it's a realization that my musical taste, they don't like that, they don't like that feeling.
In fact, sometimes directors do give great direction. Yes. And you do come away writing a better version of the original, as much as you think, "I don't want to do it. How can you improve on perfection?"
Yeah. But in fact, the truth is that they've got a different agenda.
Absolutely.
And they're just pushing you towards something, and they might be pushing you to doing something better or more.
And for the greater good, which is the film, you're working.
But I think where I certainly come from is a sense of, sometimes there's a sense of panic. Have I got a second idea? I quite like the first idea, You know, and you know, normally you then go away and you rethink it. But I think the secret there is...
Well, the first idea has been really difficult to get.
Yes.
And you think, well, that took me a week. I don't have another week for this cue. Should we keep the wine bottles on the table?
Sure.
Now, which one of you is Steve Coogan and which one of you is Rob Brydon?
You're Rob Brydon.
But I mean, to give you an example of a score that I really struggled with, but actually where the director's intervention was excellent was, you know, I did Longford, which was the story of how Lord Longford basically campaigned for the release of Myra Hindley, and it featured an extraordinary performance of, you know, Andy Serkis as Ian Brady and Samantha Morton as Myra Hindley, and it was interesting. I saw the whole thing as I just couldn't help but get drawn into the sort of horror, if you like, of the case. You know, the Moors murders. It's an iconic thing, and everything I wrote was very dark. And eventually, the director turned around to me and said something very simple and very brilliant, which was, this is a show about Lord Longford, not about them. What I need from you is Longford's Christian idealism. So then it was, I love Arvo Pärt and Taverner and all that kind of stuff, and it was actually very easy to write that, but I needed that push. I needed that clarity of somebody to say to me, you're not writing the right thing.
Yeah.
You know.
Go this way.
Go the other way.
What was the name of the thing that you worked on about the guy who vanished and came back?
The Imposter.
The Imposter. That was very complex from a... no one was quite who they seemed.
Yeah.
So what feedback did you get on that about who you were with, who you were narrating?
Yeah, that was complicated. God, I have to think back to that. Yeah, that was it was complicated. The music was quite complicated, but the director, I was just telling Rob, was so brilliant to work with. He was very focused. He knew what he wanted or he knew what he didn't want. And we spent a year in the edit. And a year of writing together. Obviously, I had to take on other projects in between, but it was really a pleasure because he was so nice.
Do you think you went on a much more profound journey with the music as
Absolutely,
a result? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah, we really focused on each track in a detailed way, and we talked about the film a lot, and we had lots of screening sessions and two different editors, and you know, working together. I just felt like part of the team. You know, sometimes you come on board and you don't feel like part of the team. You feel like the outsider, and you've got to, and you're nervous.
You can always spot the composer at the cast and crew, I think, because they're always sat there on their own.
Exactly.
With everyone going, I love it, good to see you, since we were in the trenches shooting this fucker, you know.
And this guy's going to come and spoil.
And they've got no time for you,
film,
well, they don't know you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So on The Imposter, I felt like very much part of a team, which is a lovely feeling to have.
And you know, certainly there is a huge pressure if you don't have a lot of time. You know, there's a huge pressure. You're aware of the kind of the musical themes you've maybe got to get, and you've got to get them in the next couple of days. You know, and you've really got to try and find a theme for this character or for this emotion, and it's very pressured.
Yeah, absolutely. And even though we had a year, it was still crazy at the end. You know, the big push when Picture Lock happens, and then the orchestra, and I still hadn't got all the cues. You know. And usually I'm quite a fast writer, I think, and on that one it was just so intense.
Insane.
This is something I would like to say to my younger self.
Yeah.
Try and become more self-disciplined. I mean, in the sense of, I'm extremely self-disciplined at the end of the process, but there's a long period of procrastination, which I occasionally look back at and go, why didn't I work harder on that day, because now I'm doing an all-nighter? Why do I do something similar? Why do I not start in really trying to nail something in week 3 rather than week 4?
You work best under pressure, don't you?
So going back to The Imposter, I suffer from imposter syndrome. Like, I think it stems, there's a lot of reasons I suffer from that, but I think it didn't help that I didn't go to music college and can't read the viola clef and still have to get buggered down Fulham Airport for I think that's the bass, isn't it? Lines. So I just have this doubt. And doubt, the oxygen of doubt is time. And when you remove time from it, you just got to effing get on with it. And it removes the imposters and step in, because they're literally there isn't a moment's time to get on. There isn't a moment where you're even going to stop writing whilst you're eating your sandwich.
Yeah.
So I found myself, I think the first 3 or 4 films I did were just ridiculous, quick turnarounds, 74 minutes in 3 weeks, and big orchestral
stuff. And that's incredible to achieve, to do that.
Absolutely. And zapped them off. And then suddenly I had 3 months to write this film called A Bunch of Amateurs. And I lay around my studio for 2.5 months. And then at the end, jumped up. And I also built this really bizarre, I wanted to build a one-man band for me. So I built this like drum kit and this thing with recorders that I could jump on, so it would sound like an amateur pit band. So I fucked around with that for 2.5 months, and then zimmed through it and didn't allow the imposters to enter.
Are you more sort of like, if I've got 3 weeks, I'm going to write X amount of minutes a day? Do you do the maths?
No, I try. I mean, when it comes to crunch time and you think, oh my God, I've got 10 cues to write in 2 days, I'm going to do this many, then that'll do that. But at the beginning, no.
Because I do, it's funny enough, I do think I've got into my Google spreadsheets, and I kind of, I've got all the durations, and I've got, I can tick a box and it says how much I've still got to do, and all this sort of stuff. Google Docs I recommend for everyone. That's procrastination. It took a long time to set it up. But, I mean, I think that there is probably a truth in what I read Jerry Goldsmith once saying, that he could do to do a film he needed a week's preparation, and he could do 2 minutes a day, and that's it. And I kind of think that's sort of what I can do, because actually the reason that I think I could probably do 2 minutes a day between 9 and 6. Then obviously if there are rewrites, then that may take time, but then if the rewrites mean that it gets to the theme, if you're doing your themes properly, then you'll get payback later on, so you won't have to write the 2 minutes again. But I mean, I think it will
depend on...
It depends what 2 minutes, isn't it? I mean, there's some minutes take a long time.
Yeah.
If it's a big action cue, it might take you... I spent a week on 2 minutes.
Yeah, an action definitely.
But I think that it probably averages out on that, and so I think to myself, as I go into the next job, I think, right, you've got X number of weeks and you've got X amounts of minutes, so it will take you this number of hours, probably, to get to it. And you kind of know it, you can't duck it, you're going to have to do those hours. I'll never compromise on anything I send in. I will do the hours it takes, but I do the hours at the wrong time. Why don't I do them now? So like, for example, I've got a job straight after Christmas, where I've got to write a score in 50 minutes in 4 weeks, which I think is quite a lot. So I need to force myself to write something before Christmas. Just as we're all winding down, I need to really get into the nuts and bolts of it and write 10 good minutes before Christmas, and then I'll be on course.
Christmas is a hard time to write, isn't it?
And I think you come back sluggish of the new year, and you're sort of like 2nd of January,
Yeah. Well, I used to procrastinate, but I think now I've got 2 kids. I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and I know I've got that window. So before, you're alone and you're single and you're thinking, well, I might start at 5 p.m. and go through the night. You can't anymore. It's like they go to school, you've got this horrendous window thinking, until 5:30 or whatever, and then I've got to pick them up and take them.
So do you accept that just some days it works, some days it's like pulling teeth?
I'm getting used to it. Yeah. It's year 1 of school now, and I'm getting used to these hours. And and then you accept that if there's a hard deadline, you've got to work in the night, even though you're knackered and you're trying to deal with psychological issues of your children.
Are you very disciplined in that way?
I think the imposter kind of became less of an issue when I became a dad, because it just this is actually my job. I've got to kind of get on with it. Yeah. Yes, I mean, I do weird hours because I used to be a baker, so I start at 4 in the morning. And I did some work where I got very, very match fit. So I did both Sinbad and the last 5 feature-length Poirots I did. You're talking 2 to 3 week turnarounds on a feature. So I was up to between 20 and 25 minutes a day of fully orchestrated music.
25 minutes a day?
Absolutely.
How?
Well,
What would you do? Just play it in once and
very long days, and just being kind of...
Don't you mean 25 minutes in a week?
No, 25 minutes a day, absolutely. I took Sam...
I've never heard this before.
Well, Sam Sim, a very good friend of all of ours, he was fascinated by this, and I said, well, listen, I've got to do the denouement tomorrow, which was the moment where Hercule Poirot stands up and tells people what actually happened. And the directors used to pride themselves on trying to make their denouement the longest. And this guy had broken the record, and it was 24 minutes. And I had to do it in one day. Because if you think of it, you've got a 2-week turnaround, you've got to do a pass and a second pass, and then you've got to orchestrate it and tidy it all up and record it and mix it and all of that stuff. So, and it was good because it felt like, for me, it felt like the good old days of just churning the stuff out. And if you could make it, if there could be those artistic flares and you'd stumble into an amazing theme, so much the better for it. So so Sam came up and I played in this denouement, which basically had all of the themes and left turn, right turn, and it's all sitting under dialogue and stuff like that. And he was like, yeah, that's a lot of work. I mean, because eventually I said, listen, I'm going to stop at about 10 minutes because I don't want to take 25 minutes of your life away.
Yeah.
But yeah, just absolutely. But that's why.
Extraordinary.
But that's why
I've never heard that much before.
But that's why I invented the Evo grid.
Right.
Is so that you could go like that, put your sustain pedal on, have a biscuit and a sandwich.
Yeah. And it will evolve while you're doing other things.
Exactly, in a random way that no one's ever heard before.
Yeah. You're talking about just creating a mock-up that works.
Well, something like Sinbad, that went to master. That's fully mastered. Poirot, you're talking about maybe 13 musicians sitting on top.
Yeah.
But
that's amazing.
Yeah.
I'm all power to you. I would be talking more like 10 minutes a week.
Well, yeah. I mean, things that I learned was abandoning click tracks helped. So all of that, like, kind of sitting there, making the click work and making it hit the points. So what I tend to do, and I've mentioned this before, I don't want to kind of sound like a stuck record, but I do these things called charcoal sketches where I would never ever dream of playing them to anyone, but it's literally bosh, improvise, but like kind of comedy club improvise. Yeah. So I never have a blank screen to go to, and I can always have a really good think about how I'm going to approach these things. Yeah. That helps.
I find those at night are really good. Last thing, you're really tired, you just go, sounds terrible. And then the next morning, you've got something with a fresh brain. I think that's it, absolutely. You've got to get something down, I think, that you can then criticise and evaluate. Yeah. You actually, I think in a sense, that's what I've sort of thought about procrastination quite a lot as a sort of, it's your anxiety about the likely disparity between what you want it to sound like and what you will actually create. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, in order to create a good score, personally, I think I have to do a lot of building and editing and re-editing and chipping away at themes until they're just right and so on and so on. And it's a lot of effort. Mm-hmm. It's quite exhausting sometimes to really, you think, right, I've got a 5-minute action cue or something, and I'm going to get through that today. It's exhausting. Yeah. So there's a big sort of pull to procrastinate, getting it stuck in. You also have off days and on days, don't you? Some days you're just on it, and you're thinking, I've just done 10 minutes today, great. Another day you think, oh my God, I can't even do 30 seconds. It's terrible.
No. Well, that's the danger, because the off days are always the days where I think I could do this another day.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the difficult. That's why I'm a crammer.
Right.
Yeah. I think I'm a crammer too.
I am a crammer too. I think we all are. But I just think that for me personally, I like, when I hear about Cliff Martinez talking about 3 months to do a score, and I do think that some of these scores, they can't be. I don't think you can create some of the great scores in that amount of time. I think there has to be a lot of time goes into it, and it's just when you do that time. I'm sure you're doing this time. You're doing the hours.
Yeah, I mean there have been things where I've had more time, and there have been things where I'm more where the relationship is positive and good, and when the notes are very good. Yeah. But I think that something like Poirot, you are part of this machine.
Yes.
And I mean they're fantastic. Yeah. And that's the thing, is to try and turn that quite kind of automaton, if you like, way of working into. I guess it's like making a bit of furniture like this, which is actually kind of quite austere, but just allowing yourself the time to maybe put a rose in the corner here, or to just actually make something that's actually really quite aesthetically pleasing. This is a functional table, you know.
I remember going to a lecture of yours ages ago, 8 years ago or something.
I swore a lot.
I think you did. But you really inspired me because you were making your own instruments and you were going around the studio and doing this, and I thought, how does he have the time to do that? Because when you're given a deadline, it's so easy to go to samples, isn't it? Or you have no choice because you think, I've got to deliver this by tomorrow. And it really made me think, I've got to spend more time making my own samples, thinking of my own sound, and not going to the box.
Well, I think that's one of the things that can enable you to produce stuff quickly, is when you hit a real rich seam of creativity. And I don't know if you guys find sometimes you'll write a theme and it's really good and you're really happy with it and it really fits the brief, but it just doesn't have any legs. I don't know if you find that. You know, those great themes that will work in cellos, on a banjo and on a snare drum. You know. And
I haven't had one of those. On the snare drum as well. Yes, there's something about, and I think there's something, I'm still a great believer in sometimes it feels almost like an old-fashioned virtue of kind of, you know, really trying to particularly nail themes and being you know, very clear of what you're trying to achieve architecturally, rather than writing what I would call situational music, where you kind of like it works in situation, but then when you watch the whole show, you don't get that wonderful sense of thematic repeat. You know, it's actually something.
It means a bit disparate.
That it's kind of, it's weird because I think the fashion has changed in that. I think there's a lot of situational music. Right.
Descriptive, you mean? Right?
Descriptive, and you know, I think I'm personally in my own work always trying to find a balance between that old-fashioned virtue and the modernity of sustaining stuff and being right in the situation.
I think it's interesting you to say that, because actually, and I've not really thought about it until you put it that way, is that I think some of the things I've been struggling with is I think directors and producers like the idea of thematic music but don't actually know what it means. They like the word, we want it thematic. And often producers go, you know, something you can whistle when you leave the cinema. And so, well, what's the point of that? I mean, really, is that the point of film music? And then actually, when you present them with these themes, your music becomes much more obvious, much more, dare I say, self-conscious to them than the descriptive music that they've tempted it with.
Well, that's the thing. It's a kind of question of how much you allow the music to be that sort of Wagnerian leitmotif type voice. You know, like you have in Star Wars. You know, the different leitmotifs come in, and I still love that. I still feel shortchanged sometimes by when I haven't taken a strong thematic sense of that movie away. It can be a signature, it can be a theme, it can be an instrument, but I want to take away from the viewing experience myself a strong sense of what that composer did.
It's ironic because everyone loves those films and they love John Williams and he's incredible and those themes are iconic, aren't they? And if we try to do something like that, they say, oh, you can't.
I still kind of push that quite hard. And partly it was very interesting where you're working with, say, when I worked with Tom on Tom Hooper on, say, Elizabeth, you know, I was just told, he said, you know, you need to nail this theme. And we spent a long time. I only had 5 weeks, so the pressure was enormous to write 80 minutes of music, and he was absolutely insistent that the main theme for Elizabeth was nailed. And I was thinking, oh God.
Oh God, the pressure.
Did it. Came up with a very clear melodic theme, and then of course, once you'd accepted it, I could then do variations on that. Sad Elizabeth in cello and basses, Elizabeth's solo violin. And by the end, what I realised was that it's that thing of, if you create a good theme, every time it's reprised, it gathers more meaning for the viewer and so that's how you get the tears. That's how I get the tears out of the viewer as Elizabeth walks to her does her final walk, because they've heard this theme 10 times before. If I'd just done situational music and then another situational theme for her death, it would never have the impact. So, you know, there's something profound about nailing a theme that is absolutely part of the DNA of a project. It can be really hard to do, and sometimes not even required sometimes.
It's very interesting talking about that kind of the lush stuff. I think that John Lunn's theme to Downton is very interesting, because it's almost... The style of acting these days is much more subdued. It's amazing how... I watched Goodfellas the other day, and jeepers,
wow,
broad performances.
What a film.
But it's really dated. It really... Casino hasn't for some reason. It's a bit more improvised, I think.
The Goodfellas never dates.
Well, I would like to think it doesn't, but the acting style is a lot broader than you would accept in this day and age. And you look at Downton, which is a period drama, and it's, you know, the actors mumbling away as they do these days, very realistic in a modern sense. And I think that's what's kind of interesting about John Lunn's theme is it's a theme that I can remember and I could hum to you now, but it has a restrained quality that is kind of indicative of the zeitgeist, really.
Yeah.
And that is the zeitgeist, and I think that's true. I mean, in the sense that, and that zeitgeist changes. You know, when you look back and you look at what the themes that Max Steiner was writing in the 40s, they seem ridiculously melodramatic. Yeah. Even if you look back at, you know, at somebody like Williams, you know, there's a big sea change between Indiana Jones and Jurassic Park. That again, it's become, and you know, the writing has become more muscular. It's less florid. Yeah. It's less operatically thematic.
So, I was watching Open University the other day, and they played 3 excerpts from a John Williams score, and the first team, and which one score was this? And the first person guessed E.T. and the second person guessed which one was it? Just trying to think of something that was really light that I think it was Raiders of the Lost Ark, and they went, no, it's Jaws.
Wow.
And a lot of that music is
It's just the really.
But actually a lot of it is this heroic. Let's chase the shark.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
You forget about
But it was just really interesting for me to watch as a film composer, them getting completely hoodwinked by going, well, this has got to be E.T. because
But it's interesting.
cheesy.
But then it's interesting. You come up to a score like, say, you know, that we all love, like Cliff Martini's Solaris. I can't sing you anything from that, but I take away. But I'm still astounded by it texturally, and I take away a sense of it absolutely fitting that film. And so perhaps it doesn't matter whether it's a theme or whether it's the motif that you're using, but I just think
that's what you
I do like disappearing into the film.
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, I aim to be truly versatile, you know, as in not just doing the same things I like disappearing generically into another, you know,
he invented a lingua franca for that film, and it has an emotional arc, maybe not a thematic one, with the music. And I think possibly what we're describing is and this is because of the power of the editor, the power of the music editor, the power of temp, and the power of screenings, is that you tend to end up with very like collages of scores.
Has something been emotionally lost there? Because I can get very excited about that, and then I go and watch Morricone in concert playing The Mission, and I almost feel like, don't forget this stuff as well, because the emotional impact of that. And I've been to some of those concerts, and when the Crouch End Chorus stands up and sings the main theme from The Mission, I cry.
Yeah.
I don't cry at Solaris, but I'm amazed by the oral, you know, the use of the steel drums and all that. And actually, perhaps that's the thing that we take away from that score is the use of that, because it was so distinctive.
Yeah.
So the thing is, be distinctive. Whether you write a distinctive theme, you know, like a Harry Potter theme, or whether you use steel drums in a way that I can't sing, but it's still brilliant. Yeah. But be distinctive.
It's interesting what you said about wanting to be versatile and jump into the film and do what's best for the film. Because I keep grappling with that. I keep thinking the composers who are big and we know have their one sound.
Well, I really wanted to get into this. I really wanted to get into this because I think it's fascinating to discussion about to what extent we have to be chameleons. And it's interesting that, I mean, when I went to film school, my role model was George Fenton. I'd read a thing in the Sunday papers, a day in the life of a TV composer. And this was in the days when I used to sit down with, have a curry with my parents and watch Jewel in the Crown. It was like a family treat, to watch your stuff. And I was aware that the music was really fantastic. And I remember, I'll never forget this, that he sort of said, "Oh, I love my job, because one day I'm studying Shostakovich, the next day I'm studying the Stranglers."
Oh, that's interesting.
And I actually even said this to him when I met him once. And I said to him, I said, "You got me into this," because I was really inspired by the idea of being a student of music and having to genuinely learn about things that I don't know anything about. And I struggle with this issue of like, how chameleon are you versus do you have a personal style?
I struggle with it too all the time. I think
if you look at the people that we admire, they are chameleon as well as having a personal voice. If you look at Danny Elfman, if I said to you, Danny Elfman is known obviously to a huge audience for his sort of gothic scores, Batman. But one of my favourite scores of his is Milk, that he did for Harvey Milk. And he also did a very impressive score for Pete Berg called The Kingdom, and it was an entirely electronic score. And he also did Silver Linings Playbook and did a kind of lo-fi indie score for that. I can't see any connection. They're almost like different composers. They are him, but they're different aspects of him. So who wants to be just one-dimensionally doing one thing?
Yeah.
I got into this to be asked to do a jazz score or to do a twangy guitar score, or I quite like that. But again, I don't know if that's almost the fashion now. It almost feels like it's that kind of thing of true chameleonship seems to be sort of receding, I think.
Well, it's an interesting subject, and I've had the pleasure of talking to a few composers, but I would say one of the biggest eye-openers was talking to Martin Ware, who founded Human League in Heaven 17. And I said, "Sheffield, this music, how?" And he went, "It was all about us loving Parliament and George Clinton." And I went, "What?" I went, "You like you?" He went, "Yeah, we were trying."
What was the connection?
And he goes, we put a band together to try to make George Clinton and funkadelic music, but all we had to work with was computers and synths, and that's what came out."
Yeah.
And he goes, but the word he used, which I've heard by a few, I would call them trailblazers, is the word tension, and it's often from a limitation. It's an ambition versus, it's kind of, it should be an E equals MC squared, but the tension is about the ambition coupled with the ability. And I think that's what makes, some very interesting composers who try to be chameleons, but actually it creates a friction and suddenly something bursts out of that.
And I always hear Thomas Newman.
Oh, absolutely.
In whatever he does, but there's why I think I admire him so much is because he's sort of set out these stalls. He's done certain things that no one else has done.
Yeah.
I mean, there are chord progressions that he does in Shawshank, which no other composer has done before or since, right? And I certainly know what they are because I transcribed them and try to use them where possible. But he has done certain things which are only him. But within that sense of a personal voice, there's width. Mm-hmm. It's like his score for Unstrung Heroes is massively different to The Good German, which is almost a pastiche of his dad's stuff, but done in his way. And the same thing, that's why I bring up Elfman. I think Desplat as well is very, very varied, but they've got something personal to them.
Absolutely. Well, Thomas Newman, I think, is very recognisable often, very quickly. The person I find extraordinary, who I think it never takes me more than, I genuinely believe this, it never takes me more than half a bar to recognise this him. And this is beyond any composer I've ever heard, is John Barry. You can get him in half a bar. Yeah. Whether it's Out of Africa or gold,
but then
Man with Golden Boots or whatever.
Okay, so there's a big difference between Barry the jazz writer and Barry the kind of Mahler-y, late autumnal kind of stuff that he does, which I love in things like Chaplin and so on. But then there's a problem of like that's fine, whilst that style is wanted.
Yeah.
What about evolving? You know, Boulez said that your style is just simply reflects the limitations of your technique. That style is just literally what you repeat. You know, which was a bit of a frightening comment, but it's like, you know, shouldn't we be mixing it up and doing comedies and doing different genres and not getting typecast? And sort of so that A, you grow as an artist, and B, you have an interesting life.
Yeah.
You know, do you always want to be doing one kind of genre?
And then, there's another layer, which is, can you do what you want? Because you're always being directed, and you're always having to do music that's best for the film, whether you like the music you're writing or not.
Yeah.
There's that other layer, so you think, I'm going to do something different, and then the director will say, we want that, and you think...
Yeah.
Which returns us back to the big problem of being tempted with yourself.
Yes, I hate it.
Which you can hear with these big composers.
Temp per se. I mean, I would say that there is. I think there's great work going on, but I think there's also a kind of homogenization going on as well. You do hear a lot where, you know, again, it goes back to my point about not being able to get that Shostakovich nuance in, because it's not allowed. Because actually what we want is D minor to B flat. We don't want that awkward chord, okay? Which means that that everything is becoming, you know, it's in danger at times of becoming emotionally homogenized. So do you see it then as trying to evolve a personal voice, but being versatile, or to have a personal voice, does one have to restrict what one does?
Well, I'm struggling with that idea. I mean, it's always, you do strive for a personal voice, and I'm not quite sure I have one. I don't know. I don't know if you can recognise if you have a personal voice. I'm trying to have one, but I don't know if I think it just comes naturally.
Yep.
And
I think it's in decisions that you made. I mean, I think it's in things that you're attracted to.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there are certain kind of chord shapes and things that I like doing that I just seem to keep doing, and that must be because I'm emotionally kind of rooted in those things. I keep
finding that too. I keep thinking, done this again.
Here I go again. And then the interesting thing is then how do you get out of that? And for me, I found that it's been really important to do, whether it's looking at scores or kind of absorbing others, is trying to kind of push beyond, you know, what you keep doing. Because we've all done a sad scene, a deathbed scene, and we kind of like find ourselves doing it in this way, and it's like, right, so how can I make it less boring?
Yeah.
How can I do something that interests me? And because I've done this scene before, what something new am I going to bring to it? And it's sort of...
Well, I wanted to say, I mean, maybe you don't want to get out of that. Maybe you want to keep doing the thing that you seem to gravitate to doing, but you want to just evolve it.
Yeah.
And make it...
And there are composers, like, you know, it feels like there are composers who in some ways have written much the same music over and over again, but they've got better and better at writing that.
Exactly. I agree. Well, something I think I had a moment of freedom, and I think it was just working with a director who trusted me, was I just started trusting my heritage. I don't particularly think I have a voice, but I do have my own original heritage, and I may like the exact same 10 composers that might be in your top 10, but I definitely don't like them in exactly the same order, and the pieces that I like may not be the same as yours.
Yeah.
Eventually we get to a point where chaos enters into the fray, and it's going to be different from you. And that's what I started relying on, is not worrying that I'm yet again going no, like Steve Reich. I like that.
Yeah.
And there's a
when did you do no? I'm still planning to do that. Or that. Yeah.
And I think that's something to value, is your own heritage. And I think if I was to speak to the younger generation, I'd say make sure your heritage is good, and that doesn't mean you're breeding. It just listen to good music. John Powell always says never listen to film music. You know?
I mean, my experience, you know, talking about Eric Whittaker, you know, my musical experience has been, you know, really enriched singing in a choir. You know, every term. Should we do that? Take two on that.
There's a Pretty Women moment there.
Yeah.
There's always a moment. we had a glass smash. I
find that, I think it's just, you know, the one thing I would say, and I would say it to myself as much as anyone else, is that you have to keep listening and studying and immersing yourself in music. because it's a lifelong thing. You know, I mean, my experience has been enriched singing in choirs. Right? So, for example, you know, we've been singing a lot of Eric Whittaker, and we've also been singing a guy called Morton Lawrenson, who's another major, you know, and just because I've got the score in front of me and I'm singing it, I'm absorbing some of the things that he does. And some of the things he does are really beautiful, and I'm attracted to them emotionally, and I find myself doing them, you know, because they're chords that we all own, but he's done something particular with them, and I think that's all good. When you read the biography of Ravel, he would say, you know, I'm going to use these chords from Chopin. Yeah. You know, it's a practical thing. Yeah. I'm quite happy to use those because they work.
Mozart always said it was just about developing, taking what went in the past and then developing it and making it fresh.
And I think that's what we're kind of almost doing all the time with temp scores, is that we're being presented with temp scores and then going, right, do the same but different.
Listening rather than reading the scores, You
know, and having to kind of come up with something. I think what you're saying, Christian, is very interesting, because there's a very good quote by a French philosopher called Roland Barthes, who said, your only originality is your mix of influences. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really cool. Stop stressing about originality. There isn't such a thing.
Yeah.
What could be original is how you mix up and take all your influences and mix them up.
So he goes, if you take Jimi Hendrix and Steve Reich and Eric Satie, it's definitely going to be different from anything anyone's ever done.
Exactly. And that's exactly, so that's a really good thing of sort of seeing, you know, the understanding your influences and what you're drawn to. And I think then, I mean, you know, as I go on, it does become an issue of like, well, what is it that I do that is, and I mean, I suppose in my own sense, it's more, my thing has always been an attraction to certain kind of harmony and melodic kind of stuff. It was really interesting. I was at film school. I put a chord from Ravel's Daphnis and Chloe into the Young Poisoner's Handbook, because I was looking for a chord that said poison seeping around the place, but as this young man poisoned his family. And Dario was on the course, and I played him this chord, and he went, well, that's an octatonic chord. And I went, what's the octatonic? And he went, well, it's, you know, that scale where it's like tone, semitone, tone, semitone, tone, semitone. And I just went, right, thank you very much. And so much of there's something about that scale that I am obsessed with. I keep writing in it all the time. There's just something about that scale that I love. And in a sense, you know, from that little conversation of learning, you know, he pointed out something that I didn't know. Yeah. I acquired some technique which reflected my emotional leanings. And that's what I see composing about, as trying to acquire, however you do it, with music, reading music, not reading music, electronically, classically, it's about acquiring the technique to express yourself.
Well, I met up with Gabriel Yared a couple of times, and he used to say that he would read a score every morning, and that was his sort of food, really, and then he would start writing. And then he said, you know, you should change your harmonies, and you should do this. And then I had another friend, composer, who, you know, used to say, change your harmonies. You're always on the same chord, and you just do this thing. Just change your harmonies. And I had this big bugbear about it, and I kept thinking, I've got to change my harmonies. I've got to use more rich harmony, this and that and that. And then it took me years to get the confidence to say, actually, I like sitting on one harmony for 2 minutes, one chord, and just going do-do-do-do-do, and playing with textures and everything. And then my friend who'd said that to me came back a few weeks ago and said, I've just done what you do, just sat on a chord for 2 minutes. I was like, yeah!
And that's the interesting thing, isn't it? Of like, well, you know, what we're writing, what you're required to write, you know. I mean, Gabriel comes very much from that classical thing, you know, and you know, Camille Claudel is one of the greatest scores ever written.
And because I love him, you take that on board and you think, oh, I should be doing that, and then my friend says the same thing. And I would say, probably, to my younger self, is don't worry about that. Do what you feel, you know.
But maybe the younger self has to experience the tension.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe you just have to live that.
Yeah.
That's the only way you can become an older self.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Very old and wise.
But no, I don't know. Because I think that it is.
But I think you can get too caught up in what you should be doing rather than
I
maybe
agree with that.
this is what's in my heart, this is what I want to write.
My favourite saying is be yourself, everyone else is taken, you know, and I think that is, but just being confident of who you are, that's the biggest challenge of being a young person.
And that's
finding who you are.
And you know, for composers today, they do have much more range. To be, so there are people who've come from, there are people who've come from band backgrounds who're scoring big pictures. There are people who solely do electronics who do amazing scores. There are people that mix it all up. Everybody, you know, there's all sorts in between. If anything, I would say it's the people who are classically trained who need to be more on the watch out, because I think that's not the zeitgeist. That isn't the zeitgeist actually.
At the moment, it's the bands and the artists that are kind of shining in film music at the moment. It's a kind of a big shift.
I think we were part of a phase when the trust fell out. The horror stories we're talking about is the lack of trust. I remember witnessing, I always forget his name, Monty Python director, Terry Gilliam, on the box. I think this is not the first time I've said this on camera, and I believe he said something about you've got to keep those fuckers close to you, referring to us composers, because they'll change shit up. And I think there was a point where there was and I'm generalising vastly, because there are clearly some very successful relationships out there, but I think that the trust fell out of the arse of what we were doing, and as a consequence. Yes, because I think that we stopped telling them that it was good and that's good enough. We stopped wearing cloaks and speaking Italian and saying I'm not taking notes and I won't get out of bed for less than $100,000. Right. You know, I think that there was a point where music got devalued because it's overused and because you can download it for free. Yeah. And suddenly it's like, well, what is good music? And it's like, well, dude, he's the guitarist from Radiohead. This has got to be good music. Yeah. And it doesn't sound, it's not instantly comparable to anything I'm hearing. Yeah. And man, that's, you know, whoever it is, and I'm not dissing what he does, but it's just like, you know, that's Nick Cave. It's Nick Cave. It's going to be good original music, whether you know it or not, and it is. Yeah. Fellow Brightoner. Yeah, but, absolutely. And I think that is something that.
But you see, I think in a way, I think that's. I think there's room for all sorts, you know, and I think it's never been more open, hasn't it? I mean, it's like, you know, you can be a person who's just amazing on electronica, you don't need to read any music or whatever, it's about what you create. Does it emotionally impact on people?
It's funny because I've got a couple of friends who aren't classically trained and they're worried about it. I think, but you're an amazing composer. What is the problem?
I would really say don't worry about that.
I know, and they've got a fruitful career. And I went to the Ghent Film Festival, the World Soundtrack Awards, you know, and there's a whole bunch of composers, and you drink till 5 a.m, and you talk about your problems. And this year they had a lot of, it was the first time they introduced TV music awards.
Right,
so we had a couple of composers from America come over who had done huge hits, you know, series from there. And they were talking about their lack of confidence because some of them might have not been classically trained, they came from bands. I thought, you're doing these hugely successful
but it kind of goes to show that you never arrive.
Better. Exactly. I thought, and composers seem quite sensitive. I mean, we obviously have to have egos because to do what we do, it's like a director and a creators, they have egos and you want to express something and you feel like you've got something to say. But we're all so self-depreciating as well and lacking in confidence and struggling. It's like...
I think that's because I've had to think, because I've had those experiences. I've had to think. I've been thinking a lot recently. It's call it a midlife crisis. No, I mean, I think that's because I think for a lot of creative people, artistic endeavour is quite wrapped up in feelings of self-esteem. And so that's why, you know, when somebody criticises a score, you can almost go, well, I'm rubbish. Yeah. Instead of it being all the kind of, you know, things that might have happened in that situation that made you had to write a certain kind of music, this is what they wanted. Yeah. But still, you know, I think...
or the critic is maybe just not, you're not their cup of tea, you know, it could be that too.
It's very hard not to take this. I mean, you know, when you look at actors who are then appraised on their looks, their bodies, you know, they're even more You know, and I think this is the conundrum that we have is how do we invest emotionally in the music that we write and do that, but also allow it to be used in a different way. You know, how do we take the criticism? How do we be pragmatic about it? Because I think if you're entirely pragmatic, there's a danger you'll lose the spark of what's making you.
I've been accused of being a journeyman.
And if you're entirely emotional,
Yeah.
like I've been at times, you're a nightmare to work with.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like, you know, how do you sort that out?
Yeah.
Can you sort that out for me, please, Christian?
Well, I don't know. I think it's really difficult. I think that there is. If there's two egos in the room, inevitably someone has to sacrifice theirs, and I think it's a very difficult thing to do. I think it is reading. I think we touched on before the camera started rolling sociopathy and these personality disorders, which 10% of the population, I would argue 20-30% of the film business, certainly with the higher
Maybe
echelons.
50?
And what happens there with personality disorders and the bigger the ego gets is the empathy goes down. And I think the one thing that we can apply is empathy. And I think if you actually just remove yourself from your own position, the fact that you feel exhausted and very stressed and the film's a bit shit and all of that, and you have the foresight to maybe go, I've got a really important meeting with the director today, and to check with the line producer or the post-production producer or the producer itself, what kind of a day has he got lined up for your meeting?
Right.
And to have empathy for the person who you're going to try and sell some stuff to.
Yeah.
I think that can put you on your first step. Yeah. And I learnt it the bad way because I wasn't able to back out because I was actually next to a river, genuinely. Yeah, so I went to deliver the first demos for this film with quite a notorious director, and I turned up and he was just screaming at everyone, going, "You fucking cunt!" Yeah, like that. And I don't care how good my music is. It's not the right frame of mind to listen to your music to.
No.
And he knew he wasn't in the right frame of mind, and I should have just gone, do you know what? I'm going to come back tomorrow. First thing, I'll bring some orange juice and some muffins, and we'll do it. But I didn't. I just handed it over to him, and I wasn't even going to be there when he listened to it. In that case, I literally, he lived very close to Haywards Heath, and I was fired by Gatwick Airport. If you know that particular line, you do. And it was difficult because you probably know that the phone service cuts in and out on that line.
It does,
I was fired in segments. And it's a nightmare. And but I should have gone.
I want to give you a hug.
No, it's fine. I should have gone. No, this isn't my.
Well, so you think if you come back the next day, it might have gone.
Yeah,
better?
absolutely. He was just furious, and he'd imagine this is that difficult phase. First time working with a director, first time presenting music to his film. Yeah. It's never going to be what he imagined because it's impossible. It's such a chaotic number of.
But you see, I have a basic problem with that scenario. He has employed you, and yet he doesn't choose to give you the respect. He also has to be invested in this, unless you're literally just like walking past him. Next. You know, I found myself at times really sticking up for the kind of, or getting angry about that sort of lack of respect. Mm-hmm. You know, the bottom line is I have gone away and I've worked really hard to try and create something, and this is the start of a dialogue. Mm-hmm. I expect it to be taken seriously, you know. And so it's like, it takes a lot in that situation. I mean, that's just all wrong.
Yeah, but I think
wrong. But as you say, a lot of the time we have to deal with that.
But I would apply that all wrong situation to just an average situation, and say if you were to apply the same principle to both, it would probably be more successful. And that is, don't punish a director who's already feeling punished. He was clearly felt punished by his day, by his assistants, someone having lost his. He probably lost something, blamed it on someone else. No matter what, he was feeling like the victim, which is why he was attacking. Yeah. And conversely, if a director's had a very long day and you start playing and you've gone, I've managed to do a full pass in 2 weeks and I'm going to run the score. And you can see that that director has had a hard day and is now struggling with what you have been doing.
Yeah.
It's time to just press stop.
Yeah.
And the mistake I've made is, one, give a director who's been shouting dropping C-bombs all over his staff a CD to get on with that, see if you like it. Conversely, I've also made a director sit through something he's clearly not enjoying.
Yeah.
And as a consequence, he felt totally punished by it.
But you see, even that situation, I don't understand the automatic thing that it goes, right, you got fired on the way home, because that is the start of a discussion where you say, it's not working for me, and you explain it, and then you negotiate about, you're sort of in a negotiation about whether you can actually rectify it, whether you even want to rectify it. It might be that you only want to write that music, but either way, it's a negotiation. The idea that you present some music to somebody and they fire you after one, it's just it's inhuman.
And it's
ridiculous. I did
ridiculous.
better at this year, didn't I?
Sorry?
I did better at this year. I got fired without sending it. They didn't like the look of me.
I'm sorry.
It doesn't make sense, though. I mean, we're there to provide a service, really, ultimately, if you're going to be brutal about it. And we can be versatile, and I'm sure we can make them happy and write music that's fitting for the film in the long run.
I think this is
but they think that you're a one-trick pony, you get it right the wrong time, so you're not able to do it.
And it's a big spectrum of people. There are people at that far end of the spectrum who's just like, no, I don't like it, off you go. And there are other people who negotiate, who understand the process. That it's like, obviously, if you keep coming back with the wrong music, they're entitled to think maybe they've hired the wrong composer. But, it's a negotiation, doesn't it? I don't often get cues right first time.
Well, especially the first time, it's a taster.
Well, it's golf. You don't hold in one at a time.
Exactly. It's like, here are a few things. Let's have a chat. Some of them I'm not feeling are quite right, but you might like bits. Let's talk about what you like and what you don't like.
I've watched other department heads, and indeed other composers, taking notes and then returning back with their revisions, and you go, oh, you've really not listened. You've got your bee in your bonnet about that, and you've totally ignored what that person has asked you to do. Yeah. And I think that is often, and I will witness someone being fired, and you go, well, more fool you really that you could have dodged that bullet. But
I think that's where we come back to talking to the younger person 20 years ago in my case, is that the need to really listen to what somebody's saying, and actually then also take a step back and go, well, what actually are they saying? Because actually they may be dressing it up on all this kind of language of, I don't like that chord, and it's just like, I just don't like it. It's the wrong choice. The music's doing the wrong thing in the scene. You need to revise that. You've jumped over a time jump, or you've missed something. You just have to listen, I think. And I've tried to become, each time I do a new job, I say to myself, listen better.
Yeah.
I had a real disaster listening too much and analysing what I was hearing at a screening. And it was me presenting a score. We'd done a few passes and stuff like that, but it was like penultimate score. We have a few minutes to get the orchestration ready and all of that stuff. And I stupidly sat up front of the screening with them behind me. And I'm not joking, it sounded like the pitter-patter of rain on a tin roof, the noise of them clicking their pens as they wrote their next cue. And particularly, as every cue started, I heard a pen go like that, and then like that, and it was like going on behind me. So by the end you were just like... The light went up, and I just turned around and went, right then, where should we start? And the producer went, oh no, we absolutely love it. At which point she leant forward into this bowl of pistachio nuts and clicked open another, and it was pistachio nuts they were eating.
Exactly. Brilliant. It just goes to show, you don't judge it by what somebody's saying. I'm trying to think of something I've been told to do that was really something else. I had a funny thing where there's this producer who lives in Brighton. He won't mind me saying this. It was an early show, and it was a psychological thriller. And I was doing it, and I did something, and he went, it's all a bit gothic. Okay. Well, so I went away and did that, and I sort of went, okay, what do I think he means by Gothic? I think I know what he means by Gothic. Certain kind of chord shapes, or kind of certain sort of melodrama in the writing or something. So I changed it, and I did something else, and he went, no, now it's gone a bit Gothic OTT, and I went, right, so that's a genre, is it? That's a genre of music. There is Gothic OTT now, is it? You know, and it's just like, you know, it's what was going in his head was, you know, it's just semantics. The communication was getting lost in these, you know, he felt there was something clearly describable as Gothic OTT. Mm-hmm. This was a kind of living thing that he could say to me, don't do that. I had no idea what he was talking about.
Did you get to the bottom of it?
I think we did in the end. I didn't get fired.
But
sorry.
Go on. I was about to say that's the thing about emails as well. Is they're all right.
Yeah.
And half the time you think, I wish you would just call me because I don't really understand what you're trying to say. And they are misread often.
Yeah.
And usually by the time they get to us, they've been to the grade, they've been to the ADR session, and it's usually after a couple of wines of it, glasses of this, and it becomes particularly florid.
And you can interpret it wrongly, and you can get, and then
you're at the end.
You can kick back, and then they say, oh, no, I only meant a very small change.
Exactly.
And you're going, well, blah, 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 blah.
Only a small part of your score was right.
And you spent an hour fuming and
Which was, again, that thing of sort of, I would say to myself, relax, take a step back, it's probably not as bad as you think.
Exactly.
And listen.
And call them up and say,
call them up and talk to them.
Brechtian, that was my
And
one.
also, like you said about managing,
right.
you know, with this director that you had, where you should have taken the tape, it's like your partner, you know, I've learnt now, never talk to him about anything serious until he's eaten. And then once he's had a meal, then you
it's like my son, don't talk to him before 10 o'clock in the morning.
You learn how to manage people, don't you?
Exactly.
And it depends on, and they're humans, exactly. So have they eaten well? Have they had a good day? Are they ready to listen to your music? And approach them with.
And it's really, you can see it's nerve-wracking for them. Brechtian was the one. I had a whole this guy who I bet you've worked with, and it was on one of the bigger Poirots, and he just kept on going, I want it to sound Brechtian. So I researched, I pretended I knew what that meant, and I researched it, so it was kind of austere, very, you know, Bauhaus, and, you know, Brechtian, like if you were to say Orwellian. And we went through, and finally got to this point where he starts going, yes, that's Brechtian. And it wasn't until we got into the orchestral records that he made this comment of, yes, that's Brechtian, which he just kept on going on about. The orchestrator went, you mean Kurt Weill? You mean violin? You mean a bloke who used to work with Brecht? And it would be like someone saying, I wanted to sound Orwellian. And what he meant was like 1940s, you know, kind of.
But I think you have to have a discussion about that. You have to say, well, what is it in that music that makes you feel it's.
So how does one recover? You mentioned of a recent difficult experience, and how do you bounce back from that and not let it? Because am I right in saying, without confidence, we are out to sea?
Well, you take your fee and you go and see a really good therapist.
Genuinely?
Exactly. No, I was saying to you earlier that I think composers are actually your best therapists, really. And I've got a really good
it's true.
network of friends. We meet regularly, or you see each other at events, don't we? You know, like whatever.
We've got it in Brighton. We call it "Let's have a grumble." It's a grumble of composers.
In Thailand, it's wine at 5, but with an H.
And it's brilliant. And some of my best friends are composers. And you sit there and you email, you ring up, or you go for a drink, and you laugh about it and you say, this happened to me, or you're in a really horrible situation. I'll call a composer friend to say, what would you do?
Yes.
And then they'd say, you know, and then this thing in Ghent that I went to, where all these American guys who've done these big HBO films, and they come over and they say, well, actually, I feel like this, you know, which is down, and I'm lacking confidence in this area. And you think, well, that's sort of boosted me, and then they've had these horrible experiences as well, and you think, oh, well, mine's just a regular experience. I'm not as crap as I think I am because I've had this terrible experience. And
you're not in competition with these other composers.
No,
we are a network of
fraternity. In competition. It's so funny. I feel like we're comrades.
Except on eBay, obviously. But,
on eBay. Well, for you boys with toys,
Yeah, don't get between me and a synth. Yeah.
No, it's really nice.
I think that is that thing, because I think it does, like for all of us, it does hurt those times. I mean, I think I've got 103 jobs on IMDb now, and I've been fired 4 times, and it hurts. It hurts. I remember each one, and there is there's part of me that's always hurt by it, but at the same time, by talking through it with other people, you realise, probably wasn't the right person. I probably wasn't the right person for that job.
Exactly.
I just didn't have. It was, sometimes, I mean, in a way, in a good way, sometimes people can assume, particularly if you work with a director, if you're lucky enough to work with a director a few times, not every collaboration perhaps goes as well. You might have a really great first collaboration, and then he or she does a different genre. And maybe you just don't fire on in the same way. That's happened to me. Other times the relationship has grown and grown and got better and better, and there's been a sort of shorthand. But And
it's happened to everyone. You look at the big Hollywood composers and you think they've all been fired off
Except
jobs.
John Williams and Hans.
Oh yeah.
I don't know quite how they managed that, but
I got fired off a thing, and I was adamant that what I'd done was perfect. And then about 3 years later, I was, and the thing that I got fired off was a really dour, intense drama with interrogations and all of this stuff. And about 3 years later, I was struggling for inspiration on another movie, and I basically transplanted that entire score onto that. It was hugely successful score.
Fantastic.
And the producers loved it. But that was a film about robots chasing children. And it was only at that point did I realise that possibly my score for the doer...
Maybe it was wrong.
Yeah,
maybe. Maybe slightly wide of the mark. Maybe they had a point now.
Yes, I do. I feel they were probably wholly right.
Yeah. I cocked that one up. Yeah.
Now, you spoke of a film, the Poisoner Pocket.
Oh, well, this was a low-budget English film called The Young Poisoner's Handbook.
You had an experience on that, which I think you should share with the younger fraternity.
The younger fraternity will probably never have to go through this. This was, I was at film school, and I had done a short film for this director prior to going to film school. And to my this was my great break. It was my break. And I'd done a short and curlies for him, and he'd come back whilst I was at film school and asked me to score his debut feature. So I spent the whole of the summer writing this score. It actually only was a 25-minute score. At that particular point, it took me about 3 months to kind of get get it together. And we were then going to be recording in Munich. 3 days before we were supposed to fly, the copyist turned up with pencil and paper, because this was before Sibelius. I was doing it on an Atari at the time, and we just didn't get through it. Oh, no. And I remember just the post-production. This was at Beaconsfield. And the post-production supervisor turned up in a big car, and it was like, right, get in the car, and it was like, Steve, I haven't finished. It's right, okay, well, don't. And I remember being driven to Heathrow, and it's just like, at what point, rabbit in headlights, what point do I tell the director and the producer? And I thought, I'm sure I can get most of it copied in the night before the first session. We were there for 2 days. And then I thought, yeah, okay, I will go out with them for an evening meal. So I went out with them for an evening meal. And, and then I got back, and I suddenly, because I hadn't done the copying before, I suddenly realised what a gargantuan task it was just to even pencil copy a big band score, let alone produce parts for 16 players. So I was up all night, and I just managed to get that done. And then I had to turn up at the inaugural thing, the biggest thing, H28, the biggest thing that I'd done. I haven't finished a score, it's not copied. Well, how much can you get done? I don't know. It's like, we'll get in that room and carry on writing it out. And that's just like, so I basically, this is the experience I dreamed of. I was kind of in Munich, and I was in a room, I called it Room 101, and I basically had to stay there for another day and a half, all hours. I didn't sleep for 3 days, getting as much music copied so they could record it. I mean, luckily, we had a very good conductor, and it came out well. And it served the film well.
And you have worked again?
We were about to work on something, but
I mean, as a composer.
Oh yes, I have worked again. I mean, I literally came back and I just thought, my God, it's all over. And this learning about time management. I mean, I was just a lamb to the slaughter at that point. I had no idea how long it took to copy music out. I do find that last minute bit still hard. There are still points where there are still times when I've turned up at. I mean, there's a time when I turned up at Abbey Road and I just said to my assistant, "You've got to get that cue on the stands by." And we hadn't had any sleep, and he just looked at me and went, "Okay."
That's my thing as well. It's like telling my younger self would maybe say, next time you sort out an orchestra or whatever, tell the director, tell the producer, you need this amount of time between picture lock and the orchestra. Otherwise, you're not going to get it done.
But the problem is we do duck it because directors say, well...
yeah, we need to edit then and it needs to be delivered then.
And they say the music's got to be right
and
before
they
it can be recorded.
don't understand, this is the bugbear I have, they don't understand that it's actually maybe 50% writing, 50% prep, where you spend the next
You've got to do a lot
X
of prep.
amount of just
particularly
orchestrating.
on low budget, where
the
copyist can't make a mistake. It's got to be in the right order. That point where the person's hand goes up because they haven't got the part, and it's the oboist, and it's the love cue, and it's going to cost you potentially you getting the whole thing done. That reminds me. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, and then on low budget things like feature docs where they don't pay you very much, you suddenly end up spending all your money going, oh my God, I've only got like 3 days to orchestrate this entire 90 minutes.
I used to do that a lot. I used to always say...
throw all your money at them
in the heat of the moment, I'll say, okay, we'll have another orchestral session.
It's like, whatever, just take the money and go.
Just lose half your fee.
Yeah, you do, because you're so desperate and you're
you
so
want to do that,
scared.
You want to get that good result, and I think, but it's, learning to manage your time and really learning. I mean, I'm still struggling with that. Yeah. Learning how long does something take?
Yeah.
I've got it better now.
But always trying to explain to the production company, this is how long it takes. I will need at least this much to get it orchestrated, prep, copyists, blah, 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 blah. This is what I need. And, it drives me nuts that they don't understand this process.
It's good to flag it up. I mean, it's like you say, okay, I tend to say, right, well, in a 3-hour session, if we're recording in England, we can pretty much guarantee 5 minutes an hour, 15 minutes. I wouldn't push it that much if you want, depends on the music. You might get to 20.
It's a good rule to have.
But, I would prefer it was 10 minutes in 3 hours.
Yeah.
But
starts
it's like,
are important as well, number of starts.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Your story reminds, I think, is a composer's equivalent of that nightmare of going to school and forgetting your underwear.
Yeah.
I actually have a story.
Well, you forgot your underwear.
Well, I have to contextualise it. Is there is a fantastic woman who is a massive gatekeeper for film music in our world, and her name is Maggie Rodford, and she's a very maternal, lovely figure, but she's also hugely respected as someone who, Oscar-winning score after Oscar-winning score. Whenever I go to LA, it's like people, dustmen in the street know her. She's this amazing figure. So she got me on board this massive Warner Brothers movie, and it was my first studio picture. It was my first orchestral picture. It was the first time I was recording in Prague. I hired James Bellamy, who's since become an Oscar-winning music editor, or rather has worked on Oscar-winning scores. And it was the first time Ben Valfish had ever done anything, and he was orchestrating and conducting. And in those days, we hadn't really perfected the art of track laying and stuff, so the preparation was something like 7 days of 24-hour days. We all had styes in our eyes and herpes on our lips. And then we flew out to...
this is before you've even got there.
Yeah, this is before we even got there. We flew out to Prague.
Thank you.
And we had something like 5 days. The biggest sessions were 90-piece bands. So 5 days... And it was a bit of an unknown quantity, Prague as well. So how's it going to work?
Absolutely.
Didn't realise that the Middle Sea was different and all of that stuff.
Yeah.
So we had 5 days, but they do a 4-session day. So they work from 8 up until midnight. And they start hitting the beer, well, they did then, like at kind of midday. But anyway, what we thought, considering my lack of experience, the level of tiredness that we're all experiencing, and how much of an unknown quantity it was. What we thought would be a really good idea is just to go back to the hotel room, have a quiet meal at the bar, get massively fucking pissed, and go down and play on the roulette wheel in the casino in the basement until about 5 a.m. At which point I have this awakening of tomorrow is my first 90-piece band in a country I've never worked in, for Warner Brothers, and Maggie Rodford is the music supervisor. You are fucking up at the moment. Yes. So I went to my hotel room, and I did that thing of, you are getting up the minute that alarm clock goes. There's no snoozing for you, my friend. Right. So I set my alarm clock.
This is the other voice on your shoulder.
I set my alarm. I rang down to reception. I booked in 2 alarm calls, and that was it. Fell asleep.
I see where this is going.
Woke up, jumped out of bed, went into my bathroom, but then the bathroom door was locked. So I just started speaking to my girlfriend at the time, going, so-and-so, can you let me in, please? I've got no snoozing, no hang-out. And then I went, hang on a minute, she's not here. I'm in Prague. I'm in the Marriott in Prague. And in fact, the bathroom in my room in the Marriott in the Prague is off the end of my bed and to the right, not left, out of the main corridor. And I suddenly realised I was stark, completely bollock naked, banging on Maggie Rodford's door at 5:30 in the morning.
Oh my God.
So then I could hear, because there's a business hotel, I could hear people stirring, and I'm like cupped. And I'm like, I don't really know what to do here. I'm sure there's a video doing the rounds in the Czech Republic of me literally kind of going, there was no pillars to hide behind. Is Maggie... Lucky she's a really heavy sleeper. Right. And she works very hard. So I knew the engineer, a guy called Nick Woolidge. So I ran down to the corridor and I quickly hopped into the lift. And I realised that they told me...
This is like a kind of working title movie story.
So then I realised they told me, in order to go up in the lift, you have to have your key card, security.
Oh my God.
So as the lift was closing, it's like, I'm about to be delivered, stark bollock naked, to the reception of the Marriott in Prague. So I stick my arm in, and I dash back down, and I go, well, there's that orchestrator guy, Ben Valfish. I'll knock on his door, because he's a dude. So I banged on his door, and I just heard, what do you want? I went, it's Christian, let me in. And as he opened the door, I just grabbed the handle, I went, mate, I'm naked, like that. And I could feel the hesitation of, right, okay, I knew the conducting and the orchestrating was involved. And then he let me in. And then we had to call down to the front desk for them to let me in my room. I tried miserably to make up an excuse that we weren't having a little tryst. But
what had happened to you? You just fallen asleep?
I'd fallen asleep and just was, that thing where you're disorientated, don't know where you are. And just was banging against. Yeah. So it was, and I remember thinking to myself, I am living that nightmare of going to school without your pants. Yeah.
Well done.
But worse.
Sorry. Yeah.
These are the professionals for the rest of your life.
What would you tell that younger self?
Don't go to the casino. Yeah, definitely don't. No, it's funny. Nightmares.
Oh, I can't beat that story. I haven't.
No, it doesn't have to involve nudity.
Nightmare stories, work stories. But I did have a bit of a nightmare with a director once on a feature doc. Just being shouted at constantly for no reason. Yeah. Wouldn't listen to my music in the cut. Insisted on listening through headphones on the laptop, not to picture. And
why did that person say that was the?
I don't know. I would send every time I write a piece of music. No, established director. Every time I would send a piece of music, I send a QuickTime film to show how it syncs to picture. Yeah. And they just refused to watch it. They said, "I don't need it. Don't send me these anymore." Right. And we don't have time to put it in the cut. We're up against it, so I'm just going to listen on headphones on a little laptop. And so every piece I wrote just wasn't working, and I couldn't understand it, and it was months of this, and then shouting, and it was awful, and eventually I tried to quit, and I said, clearly it's not working between us, you don't like my music, and they were completely gobsmacked that I was walking off the project, and I was like, no, okay, we'll start dropping it in, we'll keep you on board, and I'll do it, but anyway, I ended up staying, and it just continued like that until the last week, Picture Lock, they started putting music in, and it was working, weirdly. And then it was like a mad dash to get to the finish line. But suddenly it was working. But it was a terrible experience.
I had something just to explain that. Give an example of that thing of how not to misinterpret something. I'm sure we wait for this.
Here comes Bambi's mum.
An example of how to not be immediately sort of flummoxed by some comment was that I was doing a job, and it had been a really difficult 6-part series, and I'd been the second composer on it, and it had been really tricky. And we actually got through to the end of episode 6, and I was walking around Brighton with my wife, feeling like a free man, and I got a call from the director saying, the executive has just called, and she says that she hates the last cue.
Oh no.
That was the word, hates. And what do you think we can do about it? I said, well, first of all, you've got to find out what she hates. Because we finished, we're out of time. It's over. And tracking through, producer speaks to producer, speaks to the executive producer, comes back, and so on. It turns out that this person doesn't like the last chord of a 4-minute cue.
Oh my God.
So I was thinking I'm going to have to rewrite a 4-minute cue, and in fact it's actually 10 seconds of a 4-minute. I think you have to hold your nerve and just ask what is it that isn't working, and evolve through experience. But you see, I don't know if you can do that except by having the experience of that to go, okay, actually, so next time, actually that was quite a difficult job, a painful experience. I was run ragged on it, but then I take that experience into the next job, and I go, when somebody says they don't like something, I say, okay, well, it may not be as much as I think.
Yeah.
So the panic doesn't maybe have to set in to quite the degree that it did on that day. I was thinking, I've finished this job. That's we've recorded that cue with an orchestra. It's too late. It's been dubbed. Yeah, and you're telling me now that you hate a 4-minute cue. Actually, she'd completely given the wrong message. She hated the last 10 seconds. Mm-hmm. And then it was a question of, all it was the end chord. This was funny. It was the end chord of the end episode, and I'd resolved onto a major.
Oh, Tiesto Pigardie.
No major.
It was a symphonic ending, and it just ended on a major chord, and she didn't like that. So I then offered several different alternatives. And in the end, they realised that you couldn't end a 6-part series on an unresolved chord.
Yeah.
But still, that person had to have their way. So in the end, what they did was they got to the last chord and faded it out quickly, which completely destroyed the point of the last chord. But there's an example of sociopathy, where somebody cannot let go of the detail. They have to make their mark on it. It has to smell of them and their decision.
Yeah. I think that's a very good observation, that, though. And I think that we've all had it when we've had people mix our work or orchestrate it. Is suddenly it comes up and you go into this panic mode and go, it's all wrong. They've completely gone the wrong. And I've learned to just go, no, just wait. You've got the length of the cue to listen to this, to work out what is wrong. And suddenly by the end of the cue, you're going, actually, it's just the hi-hat's really loud. And the trumpet hasn't got enough reverb on it. And actually, if they fix that, actually everything else that's underneath it, not what my ear's being dragged to, which is the wrong thing.
Yeah.
Actually, it's all right.
Yeah.
And in the literal term. And
it's a lot to do with the mix, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think that often will happen with the way you present things. If you fail to present it in context, they pretend to have an imagination. Yeah. But I don't know if even we do. We'll often play our cues a bit louder than they will be, and we're often so surprised by how ineffective they are when they run the behind dialogue as they were always going to be run. And I think it's the same applies for
and that's it. I think only experience can tell you that you say, okay, well, if I do certain kind of cues or gestures, after a while that it probably will be ducked to a level that you dislike. So maybe you then sort of think, okay, well, maybe I either won't write a cue there, or I'll write a very different type of cue. And old-fashioned virtues like staying away from the timbre of the voice and all those kind of things, or going solo, having a solo instrument under dialogue, or setting it back in a lot more reverb. All those old-fashioned virtues come back, and you can only learn from being disappointed in a way.
Yeah, but you do, and then you come across people who are very musical and will know that some directors or editors will say, we're not quite sure about here, but we think it might just be a mix thing. Can you just turn down or give us stems for this? Yeah. And then it's going to be fixed, and that's really lovely. Other people will just panic and say the whole thing's wrong, like this chord thing, and then you try and pinpoint it.
I think that's the point.
Talk to them and say,
we're both doing the same thing. We're listening and going, the whole thing's wrong.
Yeah.
They're going, I've heard one thing that I don't like, the whole thing's wrong.
Yeah.
And it's kind of trying to stay in the moment and not panic. And go, actually, it's probably a smaller thing that just needs slightly readjusting, and then we're all happy.
And I think that comes with experience, because I think a younger self would say, oh my God, I've got to redo the whole thing, and I can't do this, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and after experience, you start to be able to notice or recognise what's what, really, and you're a bit more calm about it in certain situations. Other times, you still panic.
How do you feel about working with people who feel they understand music and musical phrases? Do you think that could be a help or a hindrance?
It can be both. I really like when editors are good with music.
Yeah.
When they make the most of your music and they can play with stems and they don't do weird things with it. That is so helpful.
Yeah.
So every time I work with an editor I know is good with music, it's brilliant. I've worked with directors who've known music, and then I've had this whole oh, what do you work with? Well, you should try this mixer, ridiculous things, and they try and make you feel small, and they know more. So it can be a nightmare.
Yeah.
But
a little knowledge goes a long way.
Yeah, but I do like a little bit. It's nice when they are slightly musical, but they're not going to try and overshadow you. Absolutely. Or be pompous about it, and
too fast, too slow,
exactly.
Too high, too low. I had a very. I didn't realise the producer was as inexperienced as she was until the end, and I always make a point of looking at IMDb pages at the end of projects, because I worked with a producer once, and I would have spent the entire 3 months of the project just terrified had I looked at his IMDb. So that taught me don't bother. And I looked, and it was a complete blank slate, which made me understand why we spent the entire process of the scoring with her going too much reverb. Can you reduce the reverb? So we ended up with a score that was more arid than the back of your tongue on New Year's Day morning. Just like it was just was
dry.
Absolutely, it had just been washed in sand, and it sounded awful because it was set in the Alps. You want the kind of widescreen. It was like this, all the close mics and all that. And then right in the dub, she said, it's still too much reverb. And so we said, listen, so at which point I said, listen, we've only got the stem. So can you tell me which stem sounds a bit reverby? Because this is bone dry. And then suddenly we hit this guitar sound that I used throughout, and it was tremolo. And she just basically got into her head that the word for tremolo was reverb. Right. And it was the tremolo pedal on the guitarist was a bit too deep. Yeah. And so, as you say, you grab hold of one of those words.
It's the wrong, it's the wrong thing. But there's a point. She's got a point, but you're looking for the wrong solution.
As opposed to going wah 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 wah. There's too much of that.
So you've got lots of wah wah coming out now.
There's loads of wah wah and no reverb. And the other thing was a director. In fact, there's a director you've worked with who is notoriously tricky, who also got hold of this phrase and ruined the production. And Sol Ponticello, or Sol Ponticello?
Sulpont. Yeah.
Sulpont.
Yeah.
My dude just went, I just want it all Sol Ponticello.
What?
And every single cue, he just, and it was, of course, it was the string band that I'd paid for, because, those one of those ones, and just ruined anything. Nothing was going to go on my show reel because he made everyone play Sol Pont. Because it was just this bit of Italian that he'd learned.
Did he know what that meant?
Well, he just kind of, every time we went, okay, Sol Pont, he'd go, yeah, that's it, I like that. And I heard that's what happened on.
Sound of crashing glass. Yeah. I may have even given him that idea. Sorry.
It'll be all right. Yeah. That was your way out. It'll be all right once we play at Salpont. Herman. So I think what we should end up on is a positive and a negative that you'll see in 5 years' time. Where do you think we're going with our corner of the industry? Any thoughts?
Do you want to go first?
I was thinking then God, he's looked at you.
Oh. I think it's never been a more open time for people to get into scoring. And I think that there is a lot of good work being done by all sorts of different people. So I think for people starting out, there is, in some ways, there's more opportunity. You don't have to have done a particular route to find yourself scoring pictures. My concern is more about a kind of musical dumbing down, a kind of loss of nuance, a loss of harmony, and a kind of simplification of a kind of musical homogeneity that also reflects an emotional homogeneous. I think that's the only worry. I mean, I think, having said that, great work has been done every year. I'm lucky to receive the BAFTA videos, and there is always great scores, and they're being done by a huge variety of people. But I think you have to be. But I think there's part of me as I get older that sort of wants to hold on to some of the old-fashioned virtues, whilst understanding also that you desperately need to move things along. I can understand people when they say, I don't like strings, but it also offends me at the same time, because I also know how much I love strings and what strings can do and that kind of writing can do. So, and I think the only other thing is that I think it's incredibly open, but I don't think that we live in an age that wants to pay for music, particularly.
Oh God, that's
at any level.
A whole other topic.
And I think that worries me. It would worry me for people going into the industry. Where are they going to earn their money?
Well, the producers and the directors are the Napster generation now, and that's the difficulty. Music is free.
Yeah.
So for you, you're a negative and positive 5 years.
Well, I really like what you've said. That there's a whole bunch of different sort of artists being drawn to film music. The danger is that. I don't know if some of them can actually write film music. They're being used because they're cool bands or they're cool artists, but the discipline of actually scoring to picture might not be, it is a specific discipline, and I think you've got to know it. You've got to know how to write to film music. And a lot of bands might not.
I agree. And I think that sometimes I worry that those virtues that have been built up over 70 years are being eroded. Exactly,
and then I spoke to somebody who says he's brought in because bands will be cool and they're going to score the next film, but actually it's a complete nightmare, and he's got to come in and try and music edit them and try and make them sound like they've scored the picture. So and
I find that disheartening. Like I'm not quite sure why that's happened. Yeah. Is it that is it just boredom? Is it people's boredom of hearing a certain kind of sound or a certain way?
It's a combination. I think it's that and trust. It's just, I think that the trust and respect has been lost from our profession because we've stopped wearing cloaks and shouting, coming with a cane and speaking Italian.
We're just so grateful to have a job.
But so therefore I think
I think
the trust, the very important thing that we have is trust. And because the trust has been eroded, they're out to sea as much as we are. And I think what happens then is you go, it's guitarist from Radiohead, it's got to be good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas if I were to create...
We did do a brilliant score for There Will Be Blood.
There will be, but if I'd done that...
Yeah.
Fuck right off. Sounds like some...
Yeah.
Gretzky or something brilliant, as he did brilliantly executed London.
It's an interesting point in the terms of the perception.
It's the
cool factor.
The cool factor.
A little bit of cool,
but
also just like you. It's a Picasso on the wall. It's like, okay, well, I could have done that, but it's a Picasso.
Yeah.
A good positive thing. You reckon next 5 years?
Oh God, I don't have any. I
don't do positives.
Two negatives make a positive.
Okay, because it is the grumpy composer's lunch, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, it's what you touched on is money and rights. And the way we're going, I've just done a series The project was amazing. I loved it. Part of a team, you know, we were talking about feeling part of a team, not tacked on in the end. It was great. But the money was absolutely appalling. And even the exec producer was saying, you know, this isn't the right message to send. You should be asking for more, but, you know, how much more can you ask for? And the rights, you know, they're taking our rights.
Yeah.
I phoned up PRS to say, and even the exec and royalties, they said, we can't tell you because they don't tell us. And apparently there's a trickling effect where the biggest Netflix hits do well, and then the money is divided that way. And I don't know. It's a very grey area.
Yeah, it is.
And it makes my work unstable, my ability to make a living unstable. Yeah. So I've taken this
it makes
crap
our
fee.
futures.
Yeah, it's like I can pay my mortgage of it, just about. I don't know if I'll get any royalties. I'm not sure. And this is and the way it's all going to, you know.
I mean, I have to say,
and it's scary.
I really survived because of past royalties.
Yeah, me too.
You know, the fees wouldn't really sustain
No, fees are terrible. Fees have been chopped.
So, you know, that does concern, but I think, you know, we have to, I don't know.
I'd just like a step to be taken now to ensure royalties, or there's some sort of just sort of body there to help us with the online.
The difficulty thing is that it's been very difficult for ASCAP or anybody to really create an argument against broadcasters setting up publishing arms and taking royalties.
That. I mean, I think that the difficulty is that you are, as Anne Dudley, the great composer, said to me, these guys who are negotiating deals, it's like knitting with fog. Because these are deals they negotiated 10 years ago. Yeah. Who knew Amazon, the book company, you know, when the post office was collapsing because they had no work to do because of emails. Now the post office is thriving because of Amazon. Who knew they'd be a major broadcaster?
Yeah.
You know, so you do these deals with, okay, well, there's that book company wants to do some kind of you know, agreement. I think that I think that my negative in the next 5 years, which I just will say is something that I think you need to look out for, is work for hire, which is starting to happen in this country.
Oh, it's everywhere. I don't not get a work for hire.
Well, I mean, in the sense of, I've heard of actually people giving away their composer rights to performers.
Oh my God, that
being
scary.
coerced, and that is happening. There's a couple of companies. Well, and I know this because I was visited upon by PRS to talk to me about these companies, to say there is rumour that there are very odd names appearing on cue sheets who have nothing to do with the writing of the music. So that's a negative. I think a positive is we have been for 15 years, maybe a little bit longer, but maybe around 15 years, we've been in the box. And I think we're coming out of the box. I think there's a spirit of us coming out of the computerization of music and understanding that these things can help us and are part of our tool set. And it doesn't mean coming out of the box so we can use big valves and stuff. It basically means putting microphones in the right positions around musicians and concentrating on performances. The minute we do that, it requires expertise and it requires budgets. And whilst one of the grumpy composers wasn't going to be here, was too grumpy to come, I know that he was handed a very big budget to record some brass. I was given, they found some extra money for Tutankhamun, and they gave it to me to spend on an orchestra, not on extra CGI shots. And I think the more we encourage things to come out of the box, the more we re-professionalise our industry. Yeah. And that is something that I think in the long term will help us, because they'll just need to make the budgets out of it. The games companies have spotted that. And, you know, really it's what will win them BAFTAs and Ivor Novellos and all of these plaudits, and it will be these things, that these scores that make a difference will be one of those things, I think, that will help. Yeah. So that's my positive thing. Anyway.
Oh God!
Thanks very much for a lovely grumpy time with you both.
Pleasure.
Excellent. Thanks, chaps.
Thanks
so we can continue drinking and eating without
Can we turn the cameras off now? Yeah. And I definitely want to look through it.